I kind of just wanted to talk today about kind of two semi-related topics because I have a little mini microphone now, so whatever I say is more important. Hi, I'm filming this on February 28th, which is the day of the National Economic Blackout No-Buy Day in protest of the current administration, of corporate greed, the rising cost of living, and the inflation in the US. Just a lot of things. And I think if you ask most people who are participating in this, they probably saw it on social media, and they also probably don't know exactly who organized it or why. They have a general feeling of why, but they might not be able to identify exactly what the economic blackout's purpose is or who organized it. I'm not saying that all people don't know. I'm just saying that I know it circulated on social media a lot and it got a lot of its steam on social media. And we've seen that this kind of social media activism has been successful in the past, and it has led to real world protest and impact with 2020 Black Lives Matter protests, which in large part started online and started through Instagram and Twitter and all the social media that we use regularly, and then grew and grew until it turned into a movement that people were showing up to in their real lives, and they were going to the protests in person. I wanted to talk about this because it's a really interesting moment to see it gain real traction in ways that perhaps the BDS movement did not gain as much traction with the general populace. The BDS protest and boycott was against companies and products that have ties to Israel or that support the war in Gaza. So that was a wide-ranging list of companies that have ties to Israel. I think in my personal experience and from what I'm seeing, the February 28th no-buy boycott seems to be gaining a little bit more steam when it comes to the general populace and just people who are going about their everyday lives and may not know much about politics. So I wanted to talk about why I think that this is perhaps succeeding in the way that the BDS movement did not gain the support of the general populace as much. The first thing is that February 28th is just one day. And I know that sounds like really obvious, but a one-day protest is something that a lot of people can commit to over a protest that is less concrete with its dates and more nebulous in how long somebody's going to have to commit to not buying these products. And that's not an ineffective way to protest. Let me just say that outright. That's not an ineffective way to protest. It is harder for just your average person to commit to that long term or to get over the mental barrier of committing to that long term. It's one day of the year where if you participate, you are going to have a piece of the movement and be part of the change that you want to see, and you're going to be part of the influence that changes what you're unhappy with. That is a lot easier for people to get into than perhaps a months and months long boycott of a lot of everyday products or a lot of stuff that they feel that they have to use. Another is that it's easy to understand in its title, and it doesn't require a lot of extra thought once you hear the no buy February 28th title to then proceed with that course of action. I think that this is getting a lot of media attention, and especially a lot of social media attention. Obviously, I won't know how it turns out until after today because I'm filming this on February 28th, and I am participating myself. I'm not buying anything. I think it will be hard to see necessarily the economic impacts of this unless companies come out and say it, which they are not inclined to do necessarily. And another thing I wanted to mention about this is that with some posters advertising this no-buy event is that they include a little stipulation that it's okay to buy from small businesses, and if you do, to use cash. And both of these things are, in general, things that people can get behind. So we are lowering the level of participation to pretty darn low, I would say. You just don't have to buy anything, and if you do buy something, you just have to go to a small business and use cash. We are lessening the barrier to protest, which has its pros and its cons. The pro being that more people can understand it and more people are inclined to participate with it because it is so easy to get into. However, the downside of this is that it might be hard to make this into a real impact on the companies and corporations that we're meant to be protesting. Target can probably go a day without sales. Like, they are not going to feel the heat from one day without sales necessarily. It might be a short-term win without a long-term gain. What I mean by that is that Target can play the long game because they are a corporation. They don't have to rely on day-to-day sales. And I think that's where the small business aspect came in, is that a small business will be affected if everybody decides to boycott them for a couple of days. So I understand why that stipulation is included. However, because it is the place that will have where the most impact will be seen, it's arguably still necessary to boycott small businesses in terms of a wide-ranging all no-buy day. Small businesses are given considerable note in terms of the government. There are whole committees dedicated to small businesses. So if they are feeling the hurt, that is also a way of commenting on the current political structure. And I'm not saying that you should boycott small businesses. I'm just saying that it is possibly a way of lowering the barrier to protest that is going to be ineffective towards the long-term goal of having a governmental impact. I'm not saying anything is concrete. I don't know. We don't know. We're not going to know until probably the end of this weekend. Maybe as I post this, I will have some numbers to show you right here, or a news article or something. It's hard to measure these kinds of economic boycotts because companies don't want to give away their numbers. They don't want the public to see them bleed, basically. So even if this is really effective, we probably won't get like Walmart coming out and saying that they lost this many sales today. We could see them ease back on certain policies or certain changes that they've made. Like a big part of this boycott is the fact that certain companies are rolling back all of their DEI initiatives and programs because of the executive orders. A lot of people are seeing that as really cowardly, and not that Target pride is necessarily something that we want more of or pinkwashing, but it's probably more welcoming to see Target full of pride shirts than to know that they were going to be afraid of hiring anyone that could be considered a DEI hire. Like, what does that even mean? And like, when is it a DEI hire, and when is it just a person? So we probably won't know for a little bit how effective this is, but one positive of this is, if it is very successful, is that it could be a morale boost to the growing political resistance that we are seeing. It could be a moral victory over a financial one, but we will just have to wait and see on that. But when it comes to how we've got here, I think that inflation is just so big on everyone's mind right now. And even though certain economic signifiers like the stock market, the GDP, things that the government and Wall Street might use to decide whether we're in a recession or not, those don't necessarily reflect the lived experience of most Americans. Most Americans do not have a stake in the stock market. No matter how good Wall Street says it's doing, that doesn't change the fact that a lot of people are struggling economically. And I think it's necessary to acknowledge that, because it's true. The lived experience of people in this country is different from what our institutions are telling us. And that's creating a lot of dissent, and that's creating a desire to resist and to change things. People are being told one thing and then seeing something very different right in front of them. And I think a big point of this is, frankly, the price of eggs. Some have argued that this has less to do with the inflation that started when the current president took office and more to do with bird flu, and I think both are true. Now, I'm not an economic expert. I took two economic classes in college and one political philosophy class, so I'm not necessarily qualified to talk about this. But bird flu has been a huge, huge issue for eggs. Wow. So people will say that bird flu is the cause of this and not the current administration or anything to do with the political climate. Well, that's kind of not true, because the bird flu comes about when safety regulations for poultry farmers and egg farmers are lessened, and there is less oversight into that, which some president decided to cut down on, and that has led to more chickens getting bird flu and then not being able to produce eggs, which decreases the supply of eggs when the demand for eggs is still the same. People still want eggs, people still use them in their diet and use them every day. But the supply has been affected because of these regulations being softened, and that is political. So whether or not people know it, they are being affected by this current political situation. That hurt is frustrating, and people are frustrated by it. And once you get frustrated enough, you might be inclined to change something. Frankly, the government has not achieved its promises of lowering inflation. Inflation only seems to be rising, especially with the tariffs that are set to go in place at the beginning of the next week. So a lot of people can't buy eggs. A lot of people are being priced out of buying something that is seen as a staple in the American diet and is just used in a lot of things. And something that I'm going to connect this to is I was watching an Angelica Oles video recently, and she was talking about this drama between home bakers and people buying heart-shaped cakes from Walmart. This is going to take a little context. The heart-shaped cake, obviously super trendy within the past few years. It hasn't been a common cake shape, so the only place that you could get one was from a home baker or from a small bakery. So people have been going to small bakers and home bakers to get these kinds of cakes, when all of a sudden recently Walmart has started selling these kinds of cakes for a very different price point.
You probably know this by now, but Walmart is selling heart cakes for $25. For reference, I would sell this cake for about $90.
So most home bakers and small bakers are charging like in the $50 to $100 range for a small heart-shaped cake, and Walmart is selling them for like $15 to $25. And that is a huge difference for a lot of people, and it's a huge difference for people who are struggling with inflation and for people who want to emulate all the cute designs that they see on their social media but are priced out of a small baker or a home bakery. So there has been some mud slung from both sides, let me say. Some home bakers have been frustrated by this development and have implied that the quality of baking from bakers who work at Walmart is not going to be the same as what you get from a home bakery. Walmart bakers are still bakers, and so are out of your home bakers. They're both bakers. Let's just be clear about that. These small bakers have sometimes suggested that the quality is not going to be the same, and that's not necessarily true. You might get the same quality, but at a much slower price at Walmart than what you would get from a home baker. So a lot of home bakers have gone to social media and expressed frustration with this situation, because previously home bakers were the only place that you could get that kind of cake, but Walmart has stepped in and made it a lot cheaper and expedited the process, basically. Why do I bring this up? It's because it comes back to eggs. It all comes back to eggs. The reason that home bakers have to charge so much for a cake when Walmart can charge a lot less is because of economies of scale. And I know that sounds like a scary word. Take my hand. We're going to get through it together. I'm going to explain it. To simplify it the best that I can, economies of scale basically means the scale at which you can produce a product and make profit. A home baker is a one-person team. They are the one that is going to be doing every step in the process. So that means sourcing ingredients, mixing the cake, baking the cake, and decorating the cake, and also delivering the cake. All of those is rolled into one job. Whereas at a Walmart, the baker is just responsible for the baking and the decorating. They don't have to do the sourcing, and they don't have to do the delivery. A company that has multiple workers that can compartmentalize jobs. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is that Walmart gets ingredients for a lot cheaper than a home baker gets ingredients. The reason that this happens is because Walmart, they're not buying one carton of eggs, they are buying pallets of eggs every day. They have pallets of eggs available, and they're able to buy it for pennies per egg. It's just how bulk buying works. It is actually more expensive to sell smaller quantities of things. From a production standpoint, you have to separate things, you have to get individualized packaging, and you have to sell it out at a higher price per egg than what a bulk order of eggs. That's how Costco works. Costco sells like 20 of something, whereas a regular grocery store might sell an individualized thing. And Costco is able to charge less for 20 of those things because it takes less to process 20 things versus one thing 20 times, and that's basically how Walmart is getting its ingredients. A home baker is not going to be getting its ingredients. They're not going to be getting pallets of eggs. They're going to get one carton of eggs. They're going to get one stick of butter at a time. That's why ingredients are a lot more expensive for a home baker. And when it comes to buying something like eggs and butter, even then, if the recipe only calls for 2 eggs, they have to buy a whole carton of eggs to get those 2 eggs. They can't buy just 2 to maximize efficiency within their production line. They have to buy at what the store is selling them. These are all factors that make it a lot more expensive to make one individual cake versus to make multiple cakes an hour at a Walmart, which already has set up the cost of running a business at that size. They've already spent that money to build up a company of that size. They can sell each individual product for less. A home baker just can't do that at the same scale. And that's why they have to charge a lot more if they want to pay themselves fairly. They could just charge the price of ingredients, but then they wouldn't be paying themselves for the labor hours that they worked to make that cake. And once again, I'm not saying that the home bakers that were insulting Walmart bakers are in the right. They're not. We don't need to insult individual people. But the workers at a Walmart are not the same as Walmart as a corporation. Walmart is a company. Walmart is selling you the cake, not those individual bakers. Those individual bakers are actually not being paid the labor costs that a home baker is being paid, because a Walmart baker might be working on multiple cakes an hour and might be getting a certain rate, whereas the home baker is probably working on one cake every couple of days, and that's their labor cost, and that's the only time that they will be making money, because there is no corporation behind them that's paying them at a set rate. I just wanted to bring this up because I think it illustrates that there's a lot of frustration in this country right now about prices, and that is totally fair. That is the reality of what most Americans are dealing with. Most Americans are having trouble buying the same amount of groceries that they were able to buy a couple of years ago. They are probably having to make different decisions. They're probably having to cut out certain luxuries or certain things that they were able to consider as necessities before but are now changing into luxuries because the purchasing power of their dollar has changed. And I saw a lot of people that were getting upset that bakers were calling their cakes a luxury rather than a necessity, and I think that also highlights the disconnect between the public now versus the public a couple of years ago, because a couple of years ago it probably was more affordable to buy a cake from a home baker, and now it's probably pretty unaffordable, and it is probably a better economic decision for a lot of people to buy a Walmart cake if it's going to be of the similar aesthetic that they want. For a lot of people, it's not affordable to buy a $100 cake or to have a splurge like that for a one-time use item, and that's hard to reckon with sometimes, and that does create frustration, and that does create anger. With some people, they might be lashing out at these home bakers because they can't afford that, and maybe they would have been able to a couple of years ago, but inflation has gotten to the point where it is a luxury to buy a cake from a home baker. And Walmart is just seeing that and responding to the demand for these cakes that is not being met by home bakers because people are being priced out of that. And that illustrates that we are probably going towards a big recession. I'm not an expert on this, but I think a lot of people have been feeling the hurt from inflation. They have been feeling like they are able to spend less. So to wrap this all up, people are feeling the economic hurt. It is a real feeling that people are having, and it is not something that is being addressed by a lot of institutions. Some companies are capitalizing on this, like Walmart and like other discount stores, which have always served the discount market or the desire to have items and things that are seen as pretty basic but at affordable prices when they're being priced out of stores that people might have been able to go to a couple of years ago. So there will always be discount stores that are responding to the demand for those products. But what we're seeing is that those companies are outpacing even the knowledge of our own government. These economic campaigns to boycott or to not spend money or to engage in a no-buy year have a lot of potential. They really do, and they speak to what a lot of people are feeling. And we will just have to see how effective they can be if they are organized through social media, because it is a pretty untested way of organizing. A lot of people are getting it from a secondhand or third-hand stores where they don't know the originator of these movements, but they do know that they saw it on a friend of a friend's story and they are into that. Time will tell if this is an effective way to protest. It seems like it could be, but there might be an organizational element that isn't there yet, and that will need to be figured out if this is going to be a viable way to change our government, I guess. Yeah, I hope this made sense. I hope this was interesting at all. I have something more interesting planned for, I guess, next week, hopefully. Until then, I'm just starting out on YouTube, so if you like it, you can subscribe, I guess, like if you really want to, and it would mean a lot to me, maybe, or maybe it wouldn't, and yeah, that's it. Bye.